Good morning and greetings from Northumberland on this feast day of St. Mark, the 25th of April. It's very interesting that when you start reading about someone, there are all sorts of things that come up that strike you. One is that one writer I read today says that it's very unwise to associate St. Mark with the writer of the Gospel and to draw any conclusions that he might also be associated with the John Mark that we read about in the particularly in the Acts of the Apostles. The interesting thing about that is still the collect for the Church of England is rooted in the fact that Mark was an evangelist, a gospel writer, and was involved in the mission of the early church. And I'm going to stick with that because I think that's the tradition from which we come, and really I know of no reason not to do so. I think the important thing is that with Mark with the Gospel of Mark, we have what may be one of the earliest compilations of the Gospel, and we have a very clear witness to Christ, to his proclamation. Remember a week or more ago I was talking about the shorter ending that says that really what we do is to go out and to spread the gospel through our lives, throughout the world, that the gospel is spread through us, through people. And John Mark, as he appears in the New Testament, is a flawed character. He lets down St. Paul and departs from the mission. And later on, Paul holds this against him, although Barnabas continues to support him. And there is a rift, in fact, between Paul and Barnabas over the way in which Mark should be treated. Paul taking a hard line and Barnabas taking a more forgiving and restoring line. Something that's important to remember about the character of Barnabas. But what we have here, above all, is a testimony to the power of the gospel, that Mark could go wrong. He could make mistakes, and yet he could remain faithful to Christ and continue to have a role in the mission of the church. And I think that's quite important, that a flawed person, and I speak as a flawed person, and I speak to flawed people, can still, even though we get things wrong, continue to follow the way of Christ and be instruments of the gospel. It is not our perfection of itself that makes us disciples. It is the love of Christ, the forgiveness of Christ, and the restoring power of Christ in our lives. That's what our baptism is all about. It's about dying to the mistakes that we make and being forgiven and reborn to new life. And so today, as we remember St. Mark, we recognize his flaws, but we also recognize the power of the gospel to transform his and our lives. Amen.